While this podcast isn't rated explicit, the content may not be suitable for younger listeners. Welcome to Sex for Saints, the Christian couple's guide to great sex. I am your host, certified sex and marriage coach, Amanda Lauder. This is episode 358, Overcoming Good Boy Syndrome. Welcome to Sex for Saints, a podcast for Christian couples. My goal with this podcast is to help enlighten, educate, and inspire you to understand yourself, your spouse, and your sexuality better. I talk about sex in a way you probably haven't heard before. I'm bold, I'm direct, but I keep everything in line with my strong Christian values. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Last week, we explored good girl syndrome, a concept many women struggle with as they navigate cultural and societal expectations, especially in their sexual relationships. But some of you reached out asking if something similar exists for men. And the answer is yes. It's called good boy syndrome. And while it might look slightly different, it creates similar challenges for men in how they view themselves, their relationships, and their sexuality. So today we're going to dive deep into what good boy syndrome is, how it develops, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to overcome it. If you've noticed perfectionism, shame, or fear of vulnerability creeping into your relationship or even your bedroom, this episode is for you. So, does good boy syndrome exist? And what is it? It absolutely exists, though it's less often talked about. At its core, good boy syndrome is a set of internalized beliefs and behaviors that stem from the desire to be seen as good according to external standards. For men, this might look like being the perfect husband or the ideal father or even the spiritual leader of the home. While these roles may seem admirable, the pressure to perform them flawlessly often leaves little room for men to express their true feelings, needs, or desires. For example, a man with good boy syndrome might feel like he always has to be calm, rational, and in control. If he feels angry or sad or insecure, he might suppress those emotions because he's afraid of being perceived as weak or not good. In a sexual context, he might feel like his role is to deliver in the bedroom, to initiate sex just enough to be assertive, but not too much so that he comes across as too needy or demanding. And this internal conflict can create anxiety performance issues, or a lack of connection in the relationship because he's so focused on doing things right that he's not present in the moment. So how does good boy syndrome differ from good girl syndrome? While both of them stem from external pressures and societal expectations, the specifics of those expectations differ between genders. Women often face pressure to be pure and modest and nurturing, and their sexuality might be tightly controlled, leading to shame around desire or expression. For men, the focus is often on strength, control, and productivity. Men are told they should be assertive and strong, but they're also warned not to be too much. They're expected to be providers and protectors, but they're also supposed to be sensitive, but not too sensitive, and respectful. So in the bedroom, this might look like a man feeling pressure to always initiate sex, but also worry about being too pushy. Or he might avoid expressing his fantasies because he fears being judged, even by a loving partner. While a woman might hesitate to initiate sex out of fear of being seen or being too aggressive or forward, a man might hold back from initiating because he's worried about seeming selfish. Now, imagine a man who's been taught that real men are always confident and in control. He might feel like any moment of hesitation or vulnerability, whether it's admitting he doesn't know something or expressing uncertainty in bed, is a failure. And this creates a wall between him and his partner because he's so focused on meeting an idealized standard of masculinity that he can't be fully himself. So how does good boy syndrome develop? Well, it's deeply rooted in the ways boys are socialized from a very young age. Boys often grow up hearing things like, be a man, or don't cry, or toughen up. They're taught that their worth comes from what they do rather than who they are. And success is measured by how well they perform at work, in relationships, and even in the bedroom. So this is much of what we talked about in episode 351, Why Is She Not Attracted to Me? So if you haven't listened to that episode, make sure you go back and check it out. Cultural and religious teachings can reinforce a lot of these ideas. So many boys are raised in environments where they're told to be the protectors and leaders of their families, but they're rarely taught how to balance that with emotional intimacy and vulnerability. So in some religious settings, men are taught that their sexual desires are dangerous or sinful unless they're carefully controlled within a very specific framework. And this creates a deep sense of shame, even in marriage, because their desires are seen as something to be managed rather than embraced. Now, take, for instance, a man who grows up in a religious household where any sexual thoughts or urges are labeled as sinful. He might develop a pattern of suppressing his desires to the point where even after he's married, he struggles to fully connect with his wife sexually. He may feel guilty for wanting sex too much, or he might worry that his wife will see him as less holy if he expresses his desires openly. If you're ready to transform your relationship and take your intimacy to the next level, it's time to check out coaching with me. Whether you're looking for personalized coaching in my women's membership, one-on-one guidance for men and women, or couples coaching, I have options designed to support you. And if you've looked into couples coaching before, now's the perfect time to revisit. I've lowered my prices, making it more accessible than ever. Don't wait to create the connection and intimacy you've always wanted. Learn more at amandalauder.com and click on Get Help in the menu. Now back to the show. So how do you recognize if you, or maybe your spouse, has good boy syndrome? Well, it can manifest in many ways, some of which might surprise you. One common sign is perfectionism. So a man with good boy syndrome might constantly feel like he's falling short as a husband, father, or provider, even if his partner sees him as wonderful. He might beat himself up over small mistakes or avoid trying new things because he's afraid of failing. Another sign is shame around sexuality. So we talked a lot about this a couple of weeks ago, but a man with good boy syndrome might avoid initiating sex because he's worried about being seen as too needy, or he might be overly focused on performing perfectly in bed rather than enjoying the experience. He might even avoid discussing his sexual desires altogether out of fear that his partner will judge him. Meanwhile, he's judging himself for those same desires. Emotional guarding is another hallmark. If your husband avoids talking about their feelings or shuts down when conversations get too deep, he might be struggling with good boy syndrome. Now, this can show up in the bedroom as well, a reluctance to be vulnerable or experiment because they're afraid of being judged. And again, they're judging themselves in this process. Now, a man might brush off compliments about his performance at work or in bed because he feels like he doesn't deserve them, or the spotlight on him makes him uncomfortable. Or he might say things like, I just want to make you happy, but never expresses his own needs or desires because he doesn't feel like they're as important, or they shouldn't be as important as his wife's and family's needs and desires. He often puts himself last instead of realizing his wants, desires, and needs are equal to others. So what are some steps to overcome this? Breaking free from it is possible, but it requires some very intentional work. The first step is recognizing the patterns and acknowledging where they came from. So ask yourself, who taught me to think this way? Are these beliefs helping me, or are they holding me back? For instance, if you've always believed that it's your job to initiate sex, but only in a respectful way, I want you to challenge that belief. Okay? Not that you should be disrespectful, okay? But thinking about ways that are authentic to you and to her. So what would it look like to approach sex and intimacy without that fear of judgment? Now, next, I want you to challenge your limiting beliefs. So if you've been taught that vulnerability is weakness, start small by sharing something personal with your partner. It could be as simple as admitting, I feel nervous about trying this, but I want to because I trust you. Vulnerability creates intimacy, and it's a powerful way to break down the walls that good boy syndrome builds. Next, I want you to think about redefining what it means to be a man. So true strength isn't about suppressing your emotions or controlling every situation. It's about showing up authentically, even when it's hard. So I want you to practice embracing your emotions rather than avoiding them. This is one of the things that I love doing with my male clients because so many men struggle with embracing their emotions. So helping them learn how to identify and process emotions in a healthy way. And finally, seek some support, whether it's through therapy or coaching or even open conversations with your partner. Having someone to walk alongside you can make a world of difference. I have been getting a lot of new male clients for individual coaching lately, which I absolutely love working with men. I love helping them see how the way that they're showing up in their marriage is helping them create the situation that they actually don't want and changing those behaviors so that they can be more authentic and create better connection as well as better sex and intimacy with their spouse. Now, what if you have a spouse who has good boy syndrome, but he won't face it? Well, if you see these patterns in your spouse, but they're not ready to address them, it's important to approach the situation with compassion and patience. I always suggest modeling vulnerability by sharing your own experiences and feelings rather than telling them that they're not doing a good job. Okay. So for example, you might say, I've noticed that you seem hesitant to talk about certain things, and I want you to know that it's safe to share with me. I love you no matter what. Okay. You can avoid pointing fingers or criticizing. That's always helpful. Instead, ask open-ended questions that encourage reflection. For instance, what was it like for you growing up? What messages did you hear about being a man? These questions can help your spouse start to unpack their beliefs without feeling attacked. Now, they might say, I don't know, or I don't remember. And I would just say, okay, well, maybe think about it and let's try talking about it again in a couple of days. And then talk about it again, right? And see what they come up with. If your spouse really remains unwilling to address these issues, it's best to just focus on what you can control. So create a safe and supportive environment where vulnerability is welcomed. Let them know that your love isn't conditional on their performance. It's rooted in who they are as an individual. And I know that good boy syndrome isn't talked about as widely as its counterpart, good girl syndrome, but I really do think it's just as important to address. When men free themselves from the pressure to be perfect, they can experience deeper intimacy, greater connection, and a newfound sense of freedom, which we know is essential to great sex. So if this resonates with you and your relationship, know that you're not alone. The journey to overcome these patterns is one of growth and healing and ultimately connection. And of course, I am here to help you every step of the way, whether that's through this podcast or through some coaching, either individual or couples coaching. All right, my friends, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember, love is a journey, not a destination. Stay committed, stay passionate, and stay connected. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Like what you're hearing on this podcast? Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Don't forget to leave me a review and share it with your friends.